Hi, my name is Nikki Haverstock. I'm a cozy mystery self-published author, and this is the AuthorTube section of my YouTube channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about dev edits, or development edits, or content edits. They're all the same thing. And line edits using my book, Death in the Desert, which is set to come out, who knows when, at the rate I'm going, probably early June, late May, as an example. So when before I had released a book or been edited, I knew what the different edits were, but I wasn't really sure what to expect when I got back my first manuscript. So my thought was I could share a little bit of what they literally look like in this document. I was going to try to kind of show them to you, but until I catch up in technology, I'm just going to explain them to you. Now, development edits, if you're not real familiar, of course you can Google. This is not the most exact definition because they kind of vary from person to person. Development edits are really story edits. We're looking big picture. We're talking characters, eliminating a character, adding a character, eliminating a scene, adding a scene or chapter. It could be combining two characters. They tend to be bigger overhauls that require rewriting as opposed to just moving things around. Line edits, we're going in a little closer. We're kind of looking paragraph level. So we're moving around section. We're doing kind of closer in things, and these are things that you can actually point to in the manuscript and say this line is kind of the idea of it. Now they're kind of mushy. They're kind of all of these edits are kind of mushy. What is it, this edit or that edit? And so it's not uncommon that dev editors will also do line editors, but with, you can hear my toddler. With all of these things, I want you to keep in mind, everything I'm covering today about these particular set of edits are an example of my editor, how she works. Her name's Jody. I do have her, she's not taking on new clients, sorry, but I do have her, the link to kind of her bio below in case you're curious. How Jody works, how her and I have worked together. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary of working together, and that this process has really refined the longer that we've worked together. You know, she's figured out what kind of notes I like and what kind of notes she can give, and I don't really push back on notes, so that's probably made her more comfortable with time. If she gives me a note, I address it in some way. You know, maybe not always with the wording that she suggests, but I always address it. I don't think there's been a case where I've just left it and been like, there you go. And this particular book, this particular book is pretty light on edits compared to most of my books. Who knows? Who knows? It took me forever to write, so maybe it was a cleaner book. There you go. This is also, so this is not a universal process. I'm not saying that when you work with an editor, your edits are going to look like this, or even that all of mine edits look like this. To give some context, I did speak to some friends, and a lot of them get a set of just dev edits and then a set of line edits. I get mine together, and then she does 2 passes. So if I'm rewriting sections, she just goes and does the line edits on that section. I don't tend to do a lot of rewrites. We have done it. I have added whole chapters, and I've cut whole scenes, even as recently as my last book. Maybe it was the book before last. So for context with this particular book, it is a novella series, so they're shorter books. That's another reason why the edits might be lighter. Novellas, by definition, are just shorter. There's just less going on. You don't tend to have as many interweaving storylines, things like that. It has to do with genre. I have a friend who's written both romance and cozy mysteries, and she said that the notes that she gets between them tend to be a little bit different because just the way that what you're focused on is very different. It is book 7 in the series, so all of my book 1s in series have had much more intense edits. I mean, whole chapters will be read. When I mean read, I mean R-E-D, and what I mean by this is that the way I get my edits, in Word, you can track changes, and red is, in this particular case, I don't know if you can see any of this, so I'm not going to go off of the bet that you can. If you look at it, red is an indication that something's been moved or added, or in this particular case, red is also her notes. So I have comments off to the side. And I've had whole chapters that were red. I almost couldn't tell, I would have to kind of accept them, you know, hit accept, for me to kind of understand what was even the story or whatever. So I've had whole chapters that need to be worked over, and I've had whole chapters that aren't. This particular book is a little less so. I have friends that send their stuff in chunks. I know that there are editors who send back an editing letter talking about story level problems. I know that Jody and I work this way. I'm not a great person, and I discovered this early on, that if you give me something like he's coming off too harsh, I'm not particularly great at knowing where that's happening, what is happening. And so I kind of need someone to like point in and be like, this line is harsh. So there you go. Now before we so I received this back. This is my original manuscript marked up with change notes. But for me, with my dev edits, they actually start before I write the book. So I've mentioned this. If you go to my Cozy Mystery, I have a video called Space Murder Outline or something along those lines. I'll try to see if I can't put it up there. I don't remember where. But you can see what my outline looks like, what my outlining process is. And since almost the very beginning, book 2 on, she said, hey, if you want, you can send me your outline and I'll look it over. Now, I know that's really scary for a lot of you that don't outline, but it's not required in order to work with a dev editor. I consider my outline to be my zero draft. So I get as much as I can in that zero draft, and it's a really useful time for me. I send it to her. I always get back notes, things that she likes, things that she doesn't. I always get at least 1 or 2 comments that greatly affect the story, something to keep in mind. So I pulled up, oops, wrong one. Okay, so I know you can't read it, but I sent her an email and I said, I have to scroll up because this is all of this, what's going on, are all correspondences between us. You can probably just see that they go by. So I started out with saying, here's my outline. Just real quick, I won't go into too much detail. Go to the other video if you want to see it. Or I'll link it below. I'll figure it out. I've got to figure this out, how to link other videos. But anyway, I do a brain dump, which is just all of my thoughts. All of my thoughts. There are no order. There's nothing. And some of those thoughts included things like, people have been asking for this book for 3 years. That's when the last book was published. So it's got to pay off for those readers. So priority 1 is to be consistent with the series in a way that the readers who have missed these people feel like they spent time with them. That's an important note. That's important for her to know. And just random facts, who I think is going to die, who, you know, why I want to do it, how I want it to feel. I want it to be, these are some spoilers. I assume if you're here, you're not really worried about me spoiling the book, but don't be surprised if I do. So if you are a fan, don't listen. But I said, you know, I think I want to do 2 people kill each other. And so then I start going through like scene by scene. It opens up as they pull up to the tournament. That in real life it's called the Arizona Cup. I model my books after the real life archery tournament season. So in this case, they went to Arizona Cup, which is a real tournament that was canceled this year. I called it the Cactus Cup in the book. And they pull up to it. These 2 characters come up and says, someone wants to kill us. And then eventually they both die. That was my original pitch. And so she then wrote me back with her thoughts. And I was, at that time, I was like, I don't know if I can pull off this double kill. And the reason why has to do with how I plot and how mystery books work. And I just didn't feel that I could pull out that the suspense the way I wanted to if that happened. And I tried, and that's why this book I started it in November, and I finished it it took I think 4 months, which is very long for a 30,000 word book for me, for anyone. But anyway, we went back and forth, and in the document I had said, I'm not sure how to pull this off. And so she wrote back, she said what she really liked. She made some suggestions. The character that was supposed to die has a son that's been a reoccurring character. You know, she said, can he show up to make this more personal, to raise the stakes? This is someone she's had conflict with, but she likes the son. The son's about 20. Can you do that? Great suggestion. I had kind of thought about it, but it wasn't a real priority. It became a priority. So that is a dev edit. It's a minor one because I haven't actually written the book, but it's useful to me because it helped with my trajectory. And then she gave me a couple other notes to kind of keep in mind about the balance of keeping these two murders from happening. And I actually ended up not doing it because I couldn't get it to work. But this is actually a chain. It's not unusual for dev editors to offer this service. This is something that if you go, oh my gosh, I need that, that's something you want to talk to an editor about. Usually, if you haven't worked with them before, I would say that the amount that I have spoken to Jodi has increased the longer we've worked together. So, you know, now that we have, I think the last invoice she sent me was my 18th invoice with her. And we have a long history of good experiences and encouragement. I would say if you need a cheerleader, my dev editor and our relationship, and I know this is common, is one of my biggest cheerleaders. She tells me that she knows how hard I work, that she can see my improvement in my writing. So I'm not saying you use them as your therapist. I'm just saying that it is a very healthy relationship that I really enjoy, and it's an encouragement to me because she does read my works and she has seen me grow a lot, and so that's always been a nice thing. But we go back and forth quite a bit during that. We enjoy a lot of the same books, which is partially why I picked her. She's very familiar with the same kind of books that I want to write, and so we talk about just general things like there's a whole thread in here discussing Jim Butcher, and there's a whole thread in there discussing, oops, I don't know what I knocked over. There's a whole thread in there discussing Patricia Briggs and what we liked and didn't like and stuff like that. So a lot of this is a form of development edits because we're talking about the book and the content ahead of time. Now, I, of course, pay her, so that is a fair deal. Then, when we get back the book, an example of what a dev edit looks like is she had moved this section to the previous section and then had put a note in there saying, for context, she's saying she's pulling out a bag of homemade trail mix and missing all the candy. And she just had a big encounter in the previous chapter with someone who came up and yelled at her, and her boyfriend's all worked up and, you know, stuff like that. Anyway, and so the note says, this is the note right here, just says, slow down and let her have an opinion. She said earlier she was missing all the candies. Give this a chance for her to talk about the kind of like missing the candy because it's kind of symbolic of the sacrifices she's making to compete, and let her kind of mull over what just happened. And so I'll go, and we took out this section, and then we're going to give her a little bit. My dev edits and line edits tend to be very concentrated in the front and the back of the book. I don't know if that's normal, but for me it makes a lot of sense because it's a little bit like starting and ending a trip, which is the whole trip can be ruined if the beginning and end are bad. And you'll hear that all the time. I'm a moderator in a reader group, so they just talk about books, and the number of people who will say, I like the whole book, but the ending made me so bad. I'm so mad I wanted to throw it across the room. I'll never read them again. People say that. The ending ruined the whole book for me. I don't care anymore about this author. And also the number of people who say, I've started the book, I'm 30 pages in, and it's dragging, and I'm so bored. It doesn't get any better. And we'll see a lot of comments from people who say, yeah, same, I ditched it. There you go. So a lot of my edits are concentrated at the front and the back, and I think that might be normal because I think that's where you really need to get every step right. Not at the middle. I mean, a lot of people drop a book off in the middle, but I just feel like that tends to be pretty common. For me, another example of a dev edit is is there's a whole bunch of notes in here. So what she said is, so we have a big moment between the slow burn romance, and I was going to leave it there. And I have, in other books, I have left it here. But she said, slow down here and do a wrap-up. This is a story about Di going off on her own to solve a crime, and how Liam, despite being paired with her and available, leaving her to do what she needs to do, which is true. She did it herself, more or less. She kind of went solo this book. Normally, her best friend, and it's not something I kind of realized until right this moment. Normally her best friend and roommate acts as her Watson to her Sherlock, but she didn't as much this book. And so she says, you know, this is a book about found family, so she needs to end the book with her found family, with her roommate and all that. So he's really proud of her, not for her shooting, but for everything else. And then there's a whole bunch of inline comments about kind of some things to achieve, and the idea that she recommends that I end the book with her and her boyfriend, with this really nice moment, rejoining the rest of the family. And we see that they're there for her and they're supporting her, even if they weren't here for this one thing, because that is what a lot of people love. It's her and her love interest and her dog, which is a Great Dane named Moo, and all that. So those are two examples of dev edits. They're very minor dev edits. Now, I was talking to a friend who feels very passionately. She's got a great channel here on YouTube named Zoe York, and she gets big dev edits, and she feels, I won't speak for her, but she talks a lot about if you're not really rewriting, you're not really doing a development edit. So there you go. That's my interpretation of what she said. So take that with a grain of salt. Hopefully one day she'll do a video on development edits, and I can add it to the comment below, and I can learn from that, because I'm always constantly learning about how this works. And like I said, in a lot of other books I've had some pretty harsh, like, this whole character all the way through is doing this, and we need to lighten them up the whole way through. Or you have 2 points that don't meet in the middle. Does that make sense? So you have, this is where the character is at the end, and this is where they are, this is, well, whichever way, end and beginning. I think I did that right, end and beginning. And they go like this, and we have a mismatch, so we need to connect them. A lot of times I've had to add, you know, I've like zoomed over things, and it's like, no, you need to tell us what happened. You can't just zoom past it, stuff like that. So those are an example of 2 edits, and then I got a ton of line edits in here. So I'll try to find a spot with some good line edits. Especially in here, I have a lot of, you can't really see them. I'm going to assume you can't see them. Highlighted, can you reword this? Can you make this, can you condense this? This is confusing. Try to make her more active. I don't know who's saying this line. A lot of those are in here. She needs a dialogue tag, a lot of little movements. Repetitions, little words that are switched. Now we're getting into some of these are kind of copy edits. Now the first half of my, because it took me so long to write it, I actually went back and did several edits along the way. So these are a lot better, but these end up being sort of line edits, and they're pretty minor. Like I said, lots of like misspellings, you know, switch this word out, things like that. So there you go. So that is an example of one book from one author with one editor, some dev and content, some dev or development or content edits, and an example of line edits. So if any of that, if you have any follow-up questions, go ahead and hit me up in the comments. And thank you so much.